Thanks, Charles. One of the great things I'm really excited about working with Charles and partnering with him is the clients that we've been able to work with and the way we've been able to talk and interchange ideas gets me excited about the fact that we can change the model of care. We live in a time right now where we're not getting the best bang for our buck in terms of healthcare. Access is challenging, lifestyles are challenging, the quality of care is challenging, and we don't know how much we have to pay for it. We don't know how much it costs. It's very arbitrary. And yet our lives haven't gotten better with the amount that we've invested in healthcare. And so me and Charles, we want to take on the responsibility of being disruptors, of being able to say, hey, through the network of high quality individuals who understand the science and the biology of wellness and of care, we can change the system to make it work for us. And a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is about making sure that your biology works for you, because that is the foundations of longevity. The goal, I would like to assume that people want to live as long and as high quality as possible. And so we don't live in a time where quality is engineered in the aging process. And my goal is to equip my clients with the tools, the skills, and the knowledge so that they can do that for themselves, independent of medication and access to the life and human experience they want to have over time. And so that's going to be a lot of what we're talking about. I'm going to first introduce myself. I am a former track and field athlete, ran track and field at Tufts University, became a personal trainer while in college. So I started very early, and it just inspired me about how the body can transform. Human beings are the only organism that can intentionally say, hey, in the next 5 years, I want to change this about my body. That's a gift. We have the gift of choice. And the gift of choice allows us to transform. And so that is what inspired me to get into this field. But I also wanted to understand the system. And so I went ahead and got a master's in health service administration and currently work for a health insurance company today. And I know how the system is working and how it's not really set up for individuals like you and I to succeed. And one of my medical directors told me, BK, the best way to take advantage of the healthcare system is not to participate in it. That's like the best way to really enjoy it, is not get involved, because when you get involved, it's a slippery slope of sometimes dissatisfaction and disappointment. But I've worked with multiple healthcare organizations to really understand how the system works and where's the best way that I can have the most influence to support people's quality of life. And I realized that creating my own business, Fit for Life Consulting LLC, was the best way. And I've been able to do that with the hundreds of clients that I've trained over the years. And it's been great to see them just maintain the knowledge that I've given them. So, and I'm also a professional natural bodybuilder. I participated, in that. I became a pro in 2013 because I wanted to really push my body to understand these biological processes. And so we can go to the next slide. So the goal of Fit for Life Consulting is to engineer the biological principles of will, resilience, and quality into longevity. I say that because, again, we live in a society where we are marketed the idea of health that's not applicable to the individual. And my goal is to customize the principles of health, the biological principles of health, to the individual so that it's sustainable. Because we all have different genetic makeups, different life experiences, and different circumstances. But we don't have to fit into a box of health. It's flexible, it's dynamic. It's what allows us to transform our experience. And so I start with metabolic health because, metabolic health is how our body manages energy. And metabolic health determines a big portion of our health experience. How do we know? Well, what are the top 5 causes of death in the United States? Heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, cancer. All directly connected to metabolic health. It's a manifestation of the choices of our lifestyle over time. But when we change our choices, we change our quality of life. And so metabolic health is a big barometer of what we can adjust to change our human experience. And I love metabolic health because the concepts are few, but the mechanisms are many. Biology will always win. Hands down. We'll always win. How do we know? Because none of us are going to live forever. Simple. And so because biology always wins, we have to understand our biology to make the most of it. My father has a saying. He says, waking up is a privilege, but every day we wake up is a day closer to the end. But we get to choose how we approach that moment. And that is what understanding our biology allows us to do, is have choice in our experience. And so when we look at metabolic health and we look at, the components of metabolic health, what do we need to understand in order to make the most of it? Well, first of all, what is metabolic health? Essentially, metabolic health is our body's ability to manage energy independent of medication, so that we can say that, hey, our bodies allow us to function optimally and effectively and efficiently over time because it can adjust without putting us at risk. And so when we start with metabolic health, we then have to start with how do we measure it? Well, when you go to your doctor, what are some of the things that they do naturally? They take your A1C, blood sugar. They take your cholesterol, right, and your lipid profile. They assess your hormones. They take your blood pressure. Those are all measurements of metabolic health. They're saying, hey, can your body manage, the fat that's in this blood? Can it manage the sugar that is, in this blood? Does it have optimal hormone levels that allow you to function so that we know you're at a good metabolic status? Those are baseline markers of metabolic health. And so when you go to your physical and you go to your doctor, that's essentially what they're measuring because they understand the connection between metabolic health and disease. It's a clinical foundation. The next step, though, that I do a lot with my clients is understanding body composition. Body composition is another good marker of metabolic health because it says, how is your body structured? Is your body structured to store energy or to release energy? Remember, metabolism is how your body manages energy. And so if you know that you have a high body fat percentage, then that means that your body is storing more energy than it needs. That extra energy is not optimal. And therefore, that is what puts us at risk to all types of chronic disease because the body has to do something with that extra energy. And that extra energy becomes disruptive over time with our health. But if we have more active energy, so non-fat tissue, our bodies are more dynamic, are more efficient because the body can absorb energy and use it right away. And so those are all elements that we try to want to keep in mind when we're thinking about longevity. Have we set up our metabolism to function optimally over a long period of time? Well, next slide. And so, as I mentioned, leading cause of death, all tied to metabolic health. When we have poor metabolic health, we're at greater risk of disease. Next slide. And so we've defined metabolic health and we talked about the measurements of metabolic health and how those metrics are important to measure and understand. Next slide. So how do we change metabolic health? Like I said, the concepts are few, the mechanisms are many. The body requires three main elements for it to change. It requires stimulus, which generates a response, which then generates adaptation. Or how does this apply, right? So let's take, for example, smoking. When you smoke a cigarette, you get a stimulus. What is the body's response? When you do it for the first time, you're gonna cough, hands down. And then when you cough, your body starts to exasperate. That's the adaptation, because it's trying to get rid of the chemicals you just presented. But if you do it over time, that cough disappears, that exasperation diminishes. But guess what the adaptation is? You just start to destroy your lungs. Because your body now has to adapt because you've created a stimulus, a chronic stimulus that has to adapt to. And therefore you have a higher risk of cancer as a result of introducing those chemicals and forcing your body to respond differently. But the same thing can be said about health. If you create a good stimulus, say you start going from processed foods to organic foods or non-processed foods, you create a new stimulus where your body's like, this is familiar to us. This is something that we don't have to manipulate because there's extra chemicals in here. And therefore that response is, we can lower our cholesterol. Or we're going to, because we have more fiber, we have to spend a little bit more energy to break down these nutrients. And then the adaptation is improved markers in your health. It's the same process, the same rules, it's just different choices. And so we have to think about metabolic health as saying, what is the stimulus that I'm creating with my lifestyle? What is the response I'm generating with my body? And how's my body adapting to that? Goes back to, consumption of calories. If we overconsume more calories than our bodies need, that is a stimulus. What is the response? It has to store that extra calories as body fat. Adaptation, we gain weight, and therefore putting us at risk to chronic disease associated with excess weight. It's the same principles, but how it applies to the decisions that we make and how we behave is what we can change. And that is the beauty of our biology. Next slide. So energy management and body composition. So again, our metabolism is that fluctuating, manner of managing energy and regulating those functions. And our, components of metabolism is catabolism, where it's the breakdown of nutrients or release of energy, while anabolism is the build of energy. And energy requirements of body composition means that our bodies depend on energy, but it's about managing it over time. Will determine whether we have, stored fat as energy, or if we use lean mass, and how we support the structural energy or our bone structure. And so building metabolic efficiency is the challenge of us as humans day to day. And so when we are not aware of our metabolic needs, we put ourselves at risk of either overshooting or undershooting, therefore creating a different stimulus, a different response, a different adaptation. So a lot of the work that I do at Fit for Life Consulting is to figure out what works best for my clients. And first part starts with a why. Like my mother would always say, is when you have your why, you have engineered your will, and where there's a will, there's a way. And so we've got to figure out, what is your why? What is your purpose of being healthy? Short-term, long-term, health span. And once you find your way, your why, we're able to engineer your process tied to that why. And say, okay, how do we take what we know about your metabolic health, so all of your labs, your body composition, and how do we change your behavior so that your life supports your why? Because when you have that why, your will become easy, and your will then transform your biology. And then consistency. The body runs on a rhythm. So a lot of medications right now try to create a stimulus independent of biological processes. For instance, GLP-1s. That's the biggest thing on the market. People take them and they're good tools, but they do override biological processes by doing what? Minimizing hunger. It's saying, hey, in order for us to minimize body fat, we have to reduce calories. We can reduce calories by reducing intake. To reduce intake, we just got to reduce hunger. Yes, great. You're eating less and the weight's coming off, but what is the trade-off? We don't know the long-term effects of GLP-1s yet, but the current, things that we're understanding is people are having gut issues. People are their GIs are messed up and they're having all types of symptoms or losing lean tissue at a faster rate than they expected because they're also reducing their intake of key nutrients needed to function. And so while medications serve a certain purpose, the dependency of them will have a trade-off in the long term. So how do we try to figure out what is the rhythms of our body so that we are living complementary to the tools that we have and not dependent to the tools that we have, so that we meet the rhythms of our body? And then when we do that, we create the best adaptive stimulus, because then our behaviors complement the way our bodies need to transform naturally. And that natural transformation is what's going to support health span and longevity. And so Fit for Life Consulting, we start with a metabolic focus on data. We collect data on not just your, clinical data, your A1C, blood pressure, things like that, your body composition, but also your behaviors. We want to understand what are the stimulus of your life that's going to inform how your body changes. And then we look at how do we focus on the 20% that's going to get you 80% of the results. Because we want to make sure it works for you and it's sustainable. Because if it's not sustainable, it's not going to work. And so we start small and we build and stack over time so that you see the value of your transformational process. And so how do you start? Or what can you do independent of my support and just understanding, your goal in terms of health span? Get your measurements, know your numbers. Get your, I encourage my clients every quarter, get your blood pressure, A1C, your hormonal panel, your cholesterol screenings. Get those numbers, understand where you're at. Get a DEXA scan. I partner with a couple, vendors in this area where you can get a DEXA scan and just know your body composition. Get a baseline. Do physical fitness tests, because again, exercise is a stimulus for transformation. So where are you at and where do you want to be, so that you're able to have access to your body over a lifetime? And then again, continue to measure and try to make sure your results are sustainable. And so, quick checklist: assess your metabolic health, modify your behaviors, change your body composition by building lean muscle, manage your body fat composition, increase movement so that stimulus supports your body, and then I can't stress enough, improve sleep and recovery. A lot of people think that, I'm gonna go balls to the wall with my training. You can only train as hard as you recover. And so you wanna make sure that you're meeting that homeostasis demand of your body physically and level up over time. So, I'll end with this quote. Effort without alignment is wasted energy. Energy is not infinite, it is finite. As a result, how we choose to manage this limited resource influences our path to longevity. Our health is the most important investment we have. Because like my father would say, if you don't have good health, you don't have anything. There's a Buddhist saying, if you're healthy, you have 1,000 problems. If you're unhealthy, you only have one. And so let's, as we live in a time of, multiple distractions, we always want to focus on what is the experience that we ultimately want, for ourselves and for the people that we love. And we want to be there to show up for that. So thank you for your time, and it's been a pleasure.